from the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal. This is All Things with Kim Strassel.
Welcome to All Things with Kim Strassel. And this week, we are pleased to bring to the show Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins, who only today was in front of the cameras in the Oval Office next to Donald Trump, before then heading off to meet with Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and two governors to discuss food stamp reform. So, Secretary, thank you so much for joining us on such a slow day in your life.
Well, I would like to say this day is unusual, but really, Kim, they are all about this. We call this Trump time. We're sort of moving really fast all day, every day, but it's an honor to be on and obviously have read your work for a really long time. So thank you for the opportunity.
No, thank you. I want to get into food stamps and some of the big reforms that are happening there because I think they're so important. But I do want to ask you really quick about the Oval Office event today because it was somewhat impromptu, but it's an issue I'm really fascinated by and excited about because I grew up in the Pacific Northwest and I watched the Clinton administration slowly cripple my home logging industry. But today, Trump was talking about wildfires and then he went into discussing logging and timber management. And a lot of people may not know this or they might forget that the National Forest Service is part of the Department of Agriculture. So can you talk to us a little bit about the big plans you guys have for reviving active timber management on federal forests and in the process, timber and lumber production?
I sure can. And it was a great event in the Oval Office. The primary purpose was to talk about the operational readiness of our wildland firefighters. A lot of people don't know, to your point, that USDA manages the Forest Service. And with that comes about 12,000 full-time firefighters. And so ensuring that we are ready for that season as we're moving into fire season. Looks like it's going to be a hot one, a significant one this time, was the point of the event. But to your point, and actually very interconnected, is the fact that under Democrat sort of leftist agendas, that our timber industry in America has slowly been dying. 30 years ago, Kim, 1994, we were producing about 4 billion acre feet of our own timber, able to basically, not feed ourselves, but provide the timber for ourselves in America, not needing to import anything 30 years ago from Canada, China, et cetera. Today, because of that radical agenda, the Environmental Protection Act, the shutting down of any sort of timber industry in America, specific to your point, the Pacific Northwest, we are at almost half of what we used to be. So the president really has made this a priority, which is pretty cool to watch, that with the stroke of his pen under an executive order a month or two ago, the goal being to get back to producing enough timber in this country that we don't need to import anymore, getting back to that 4 billion acre feet from that a little bit over 2 billion where we are today. And just in this coming year, Kim, we'll be at an increase of 25% more timber, with more increases to come in the coming 3 or 4 years. So it was a big day. And the reason that was important to today's conversation is as we revive our timber industry, that clears the forest, right? So that we don't have as many forest wildfires, that we don't lose as many homes or lives moving forward because we're taking care of our forests. So that, to your point, that's a really big deal. And I appreciate you recognizing that.
Yeah, you can see it out where like I said, I grew up in Oregon, and where you have state timber management and private timber management, they don't have near the fire problem that the federal forests have. And that is a result of timber management. So let's talk about SNAP, otherwise known as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This is food assistance. A lot of people know it as food stamps, but of course, everyone today now has a card. And I want to talk both about some of the waivers that you are issuing, but also SNAP reform as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill. Before we get into those specifics, though, maybe we could just set the stage. We've had a remarkable growth in the number of people in SNAP over the decades. I was looking at the stats. In 2001, we had about 17 million people in the country on SNAP. In 2023, more than 42 million. So that's a 2.5 times growth. What has fueled all of that growth?
Well, I think you see, obviously, under the 8 years of Barack Obama, under the 4 years of Joe Biden, an insane amount of money that began to flow through the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. As you saw more and more people under those ideas, that the more people that they would measure their government programs, Kim, and you know this, and I think you've written about it, based on the amount amount of people they can pile onto the program, whether they are able to work, whether they work or not. It's how much government money, how much taxpayer dollars, I should say, we are handing out to people. And whether or not it was necessary wasn't really part of the equation. Under the first Trump administration, which I was a part of, albeit in the West Wing and the domestic policy team, we actually saw a decrease in the number of people using food stamps, which from our perspective should be the metric. How many people are we moving into good private sector jobs? How many people are we moving off government programs and off the taxpayer dole? That's how we should be measuring ourselves. And so that's the new day where we are again today. It is really remarkable. I'm sure you've paid a lot of attention to this, Kim, the amount of fluff and fat that was injected into these programs, especially under the Biden administration with the IRA funding, the Inflation Reduction Act funding that was supposed to be spent over 10 years. Instead, they basically tried to put as much money as they could into the system. So while we are rolling that back, while we are refocusing the program on those who truly need it, we are also ensuring that the supplemental nutrition assistance program is also doing what it was intended to do. And that is to provide nutritious food, especially to those, the least among us, with those on the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. So that meant today, as we're signing these SNAP waivers, no more sugary drinks, no more junk food, which, by the way, is the largest spend of those who use the food stamp program. That's what the most and the biggest spend is on. So the states are coming forward. I asked them to be innovative, to submit their waivers within the first hour of my time after being sworn in as USDA secretary. What is remarkable to me is that this has never happened before, probably a reflection of the very powerful industry and lobby here in Washington. But it's so clear. I mean, this is black or white. Why should taxpayers be buying sugary drinks that make our population more sick through the SNAP program that we pay again on the back end through Medicaid, Medicare, et cetera? So it's a really exciting day. We signed Utah, Idaho, and Arkansas today. We've already signed Iowa and Nebraska. We've got 6 other states in the next few weeks, and it's a new day.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more with Brooke Rollins. Welcome back. I'm Kim Strassel here with Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins. So reassure those of us out there that count ourselves more on the libertarian side. The argument here, and let's to be clear, SNAP has always excluded some products, in particular tobacco, alcohol, hot, ready-made food, etc. And now we're going to be excluding, for those states that have asked, and you've just named them, sugary drinks, some snacks, candy, for instance. Is the argument here that because people are getting taxpayer assistance, as you said, that we need to be frugal and make sure that this money is being used on healthy food? And so that is a restriction that is valid for SNAP. I'm assuming nobody is going to advocate that the government should take away everyone's right to have chips or a candy bar.
Of course. And Kim, I'm with you 100%. We're not going to tell people what to eat or what to drink. But what we are going to do is make sure that if a taxpayer dollar is being used, that it is being used as intended with again, sort of a refocused alignment on what is important and what we're doing here in Washington. And that is working toward freedom, working toward less government, working toward prosperity, moving people off of government programs, and ensuring that every taxpayer dollar is spent to its highest and best use.
So here's what I really love about this is the fact that states are coming to you. And obviously this is a partnership in some of these programs. For instance, food benefits. There's federal dollars that flow to them, but the states largely manage these programs. And I love that they are coming to you and saying, hey, can we manage this in a different way that we think will make it healthier or more efficient? You're talking about waivers with regard to some of these food products that can be included or excluded, as it were. But are you having any discussions with states about other types of waivers or innovations that might be possible in SNAP or other federal programs that you oversee?
Yeah, 100%. And Kim, I don't think you and I have ever spent much time talking, but in the first White House, I am such a believer in federalism and the 10th Amendment and the states being the laboratories of democracy in our founding fathers' vision of we should have a very small federal government, and the government that's closest to the people, i.e. the states, and the local government should be the one making the bulk of the decisions. I mean, that's just my heart. That is my passion, is how do we devolve power back to the people? And I think that's what Donald Trump represented unprecedented when he came down that escalator for the first time in 2015. And you see that now really, I think, in a more powerful and elevated way than ever before while we're in the Trump era, whether it's education and deconstructing the Department of Education, moving to block grants, whether that is here at USDA. I could not be more excited. And again, my first hour here at USDA when I was sworn in, those letters went out to every governor, Republican and Democrat. I then got them all on Zoom. I now follow up with all of them every week. Send me your innovative ideas. We will move them through quickly. Washington can't solve these problems, nor should we be trying. You on the ground can solve them. So one example of that, and I had Governor Sanders in today, who was a great friend of mine from, she was press secretary when I was running domestic policy in the first Trump administration. So we go way back. But she talks about how she is now redirecting her school lunch programs and her local programs to buy from local farmers so that you have more locally sourced, nutritious foods. And this is not hard. Like, this should not be a difficult decision, but just letting the governors have the flexibility to make those decisions, to support those decisions, and to move out on those decisions not only gets the federal government out of the way, but it provides better solutions for our people in this country.
We're going to take one more break. When we come back, more with Brooke Rollins on the SNAP reform.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is All Things with Kim Strassel.
Welcome back. Well, the other part of this, and you touched on it earlier when we were talking about the growth in SNAP over the years and all the fluff, as you said, that was injected in the Obama and Biden years. And what ended up happening is, as noted, a lot of that money went out, and their goal was to actually get more people on these programs because they ideologically believe in cradle to grave entitlements, especially from the federal government.
That's right.
Obviously, your interest and mine as well, too, is government assistance for those who really need it, but we should be putting people back into good paying jobs, allow them to stand on their own 2 feet. And this is the part that's being tackled as part of the reconciliation bill going through Congress. And I just want to get your views on some of the changes that are happening in there. Obviously, one of the things that they're doing is instituting some work requirements. Do you think they go far enough? How much do you think is going to change the equation?
Well, having come from a state, I worked in Texas policy through my think tank there. And then a long time ago was Governor Rick Perry's policy director. I have been working on these specific issues in terms of work requirements, the dignity of work for now more than 2 decades. And I just can't underscore how important I believe that is. And also that most Americans agree with this. I mean, the Democrats may all stand up and yell about how unfair it is and how we hate poor people, but it couldn't be further from the truth. What we believe is that less government and a stronger private sector not just helps those of us, who are already doing well, but the people it helps the most are those who are the least among us, right? It's those at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. And as the left and the Democrats work to, your point, create this cradle to grave, quote, safety net, really what they want are people dependent on the government, which is a bigger and more steps towards socialism. And of course, in their mind, creating a voter base that they will never lose if they can create, these government programs where people are dependent on the government. And I think, whether you love President Trump or whether you don't love President Trump, what his leadership and vision and sort of transformational disruption in his approach to policy, part of it is returning power to the people, creating an environment of dignity of work. And that happened in the first administration. I mean, Kim, I'm sure you remember the lowest poverty rates on record, especially in our minority communities, the highest job numbers on record. I mean, this is incredible. And you think it took us about a year to kind of figure out where the bathrooms were, right? Then we had year 2 and year 3, which I think was, again, I know was unprecedented. I don't think was unprecedented. I know was unprecedented in terms of policy wins. And then COVID hit. But in that short period of time, what we were able to prove was the founder's vision, that you create the opportunity, you get out of the way, you let free enterprise and capitalism work. And when you do, you create, and the American dream prospers unlike never before. So what the big, beautiful bill includes, and by the way, the president is a genius at branding, right? It's like the other side is already losing when they call it the big, beautiful bill, because that's, you're already branding it as something big and beautiful. But what that includes is this significant reforms to SNAP that include work just for able-bodied adults without children. It's not even, that big of a request from my perspective. And your question is, do I think it goes far enough? I don't. I think that everyone should be required to work if they are so able. And hopefully, again, we're creating with I think the newest number is $5 or $6 trillion that's being reshored by the private industry back into America as we reduce in force our federal government, moving all of those Americans into better paying, better supporting jobs where these government programs aren't even necessary. I think we're going to see some pretty significant wins in a couple of years.
The other part of this that they're doing in reconciliation is asking states to chip in a little bit. And the idea behind this is that, as noted, the states manage their roles, manage a lot of these programs. And the idea is you're going to give them a little bit of buy-in to make sure they're on top of it when it comes to overseeing who's getting it and overseeing the management of their programs. You've been talking to these governors. You were just with some today. We've heard some pushback from some members of Congress, even including some Republicans who are unsettled by this notion. They think the federal government should pay for all of it. What are you hearing from the governors on this?
Listen, USDA spends $400 million a day on nutrition programs, Kim. $400 million a day. That should stun every single American in this country.
Holy moly.
And I'm not even sure we've seen better outcomes with all of that money. It is time that we begin to, as I mentioned at the top of our discussion, roll back a lot of these programs to the states. Does that mean that the federal government steps out completely? Of course not. But does that mean that we begin to partner in a more intentional and compelling way, which includes some funding? Yes. And I don't know how anyone could argue against that. I know people are, but we are not here for this big bloated federal government that basically is controlling all of this money. We want to return power to the state. So will it be hard? It might be, but these are discussions that need to happen. When you've got almost 30% by some measures of fraud in the SNAP program, I mean, that's billions, tens of billions of dollars over a number of years that we're just not spending it correctly. So I think having the states more involved, having more accountability, having more skin in the game is always a positive thing.
Well, count me as someone who shares your vision. I still dream of the day when we've got these percentages flipped where a tiny proportion of my tax dollars go to a very limited federal government. I'd be willing to pay more to the states then who are managing the programs closer to me. So we're there together on this. We'll be looking forward to seeing how this rolls out. Secretary Rollins, thank you so much for taking the time. We want to thank our listeners. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and you can write to us at atkim@wsj.com.